Hello, my name is Justin Pulliam, and I will be covering the nuclear renaissance fact or fiction for Nuclear 495, the nuclear capstone, and this is my presentation. The nuclear renaissance has a variety of different topics which cover whether the possibility of a nuclear renaissance is possible. The sections I will be covering in this presentation are nuclear waste, safety, energy demand, personnel constraints, and new technology. One of the biggest problems we have in the United States, as well as around the world, is nuclear waste. What do we currently do with all of our nuclear waste, and where has it been going? We're also going to discuss what Yucca Mountain is and the controversy that surrounds it. We'll also discuss other alternatives besides long-term permanent storage for the spent fuel. In discussing what to do with nuclear waste and the long-term storage of it, we need to first understand what happens to it at first. Fuel normally spends anywhere from 3 to 6 years inside a nuclear reactor before it is fully spent. Spent fuel is then submerged in water for a few years locally at the plants before being put into steel casings and massive concrete caskets where they are cooled. Currently, the spent fuel we have currently sits at 75 different sites in 33 states, which is either stored in cooling ponds, or when those pools have reached their full capacity, they are stored in expensive dry cask storage facilities adjacent to current operational reactor sites. The United States idea for permanently storing this nuclear waste was to bury it in Yucca Mountain. Yucca Mountain is located about 90 miles northwest of Las Vegas on an uninhabited federal land adjacent to the Nevada test site, where the U.S. government has been testing nuclear weapons since 1951. Unfortunately, the Yucca Mountain site has been site of much controversy and legal battles. At the time, Congress ordered the Department of Energy to conduct a viability assessment of the Yucca Mountain site to identify any critical issues that would make the site unsuitable for storage and to update Congress on the site's progress. After conducting the assessment, the Department of Energy found that the Yucca Mountain remained a very promising site for a geological repository. Then, officials in Nevada filed a notice of disapproval, which essentially vetoed Yucca Mountain as an acceptable storage site unless both Congress and the President decided to override it. Then President Bush, after Congress already approved it, signed the approval resolution to begin the licensing stage of Yucca Mountain. When Mr. Obama took office in 2009, he slashed the funds for the program and appointed a commission to revisit the issue of storing highly radioactive spent fuel. A year later, when the White House top energy advisor declared that the debate over Yucca Mountain is over, as the president made it clear, we're done with Yucca, we need to be looking for other alternatives. One possible alternative to permanent storage of spent fuel would be to reprocess it. This practice is currently being done in France, and South Korea would like to start moving in that direction. Praise of France's management of spent fuel by reprocessing, including its use of extracted plutonium as fuel in its nuclear power reactors, is now routinely heard. Many people believe, though, that the reprocessing is not the answer for the United States' nuclear waste woes. The volume of waste to be disposed of in a deep geological repository is increased about 6 times on a life cycle basis in the French approach compared to the once through no reprocessing approach of the United States. The belief that reprocessing would be a great idea still exists. At the beginning of the nuclear age, the plan was to recycle the uranium and plutonium into new fuel, discarding only short-lived fission products. In theory, this would reduce the volume of nuclear waste by up to 90%. There are other options that seem to be quite viable. One of those would be finding a new permanent storage site besides Yucca Mountain. Finding a new storage site would be the default choice by most parties, but there's always going to be objections and environmental concerns on the feasibility of this. Interim facilities are a possible short-term option and have been recommended by the Blue Ribbon Commission. Spent nuclear fuel would be consolidated, decreasing the complexity and security and overseeing the waste and increasing the efficiency of waste storage operations. Centralized interim storage would also allow the Department of Energy to remove waste from DOE managed facilities and the 9 decommissioned reactor sites, allowing them to close. Final option, and least likely, would be non-repository sites. This would include burying the spent fuel in canisters and burying them in stable clay sediments that have been researched but outlawed since 1972. The most outrageous idea would be to shooting our spent nuclear fuel into outer space, as is not a practical idea. This is a very costly approach given the small size of the shuttle, the amount of waste requiring disposal, concerns about launch safety, the immense cost of a launch, and the concern over the re-entry of the shuttle. While the United States and the entire world research and try to develop plans on storing or reusing spent reactor fuel, it greatly affects the chances of a nuclear renaissance from happening. There would be a greater possibility, especially in the U.S., if there was an improved long-term plan to deal with the ever-growing problem of nuclear waste. In this section, we're going to talk about safety. We'll talk about nuclear accidents and incidents, and what classifies an accident or incident. We'll briefly talk about Fukushima, Japan, and what occurred there, and what still continues to occur there today. We'll also talk about the possibility of more accidents. So what is a nuclear accident, and what is an incident? The International Nuclear and Radiological Event Scale communicates the significance of a nuclear and radiological event through a logarithmic ranking system of 8 levels. Level 0 is a no safety significance. Levels 1 and 3 are incidences, where levels 4 through 7 are accidents. They do have a level 7 major accident, which consists of a major release of radioactive material with widespread health and environmental effects requiring implementation of planned and extended countermeasures. There are thousands of reported incidents in our country to date and more than a few accidents. The International Atomic Energy Agency is charged with maintaining a restricted database of event reports which record any incident of significant safety at nuclear power facilities. Has reported no less than 2,400 separate incidences since the organization began collecting data in the 1950s. The list of incidences include minor events like a thermostat being wired wrong or even a recent transformer fire at the Progress Energy Sharon Harris plant. Also included are major accidents or events like 3 Mile Island, and a 4-week shutdown and a 24-hour blackout occurred after a stray cat wandered into a reactor and shorted a circuit. The most recent nuclear accident occurred at the Daiichi nuclear plant in Fukushima, Japan. It was a level 7 accident, and we're going to discuss how it happened and what's currently going on there today. As we already stated, Fukushima was a level 7 major accident. It was created by 2 consecutive natural disasters. First, the earthquake that occurred, and a subsequent tsunami that followed it. So what is the status of Fukushima now? The plant still continues to pour radioactive liquid into the Pacific Ocean, now 3 years later after the initial accident, and it still poses a serious threat to sea life. As you can see in the graph, the red areas are higher levels of contamination and have stretched all the way over to the United States' west coast. So is this the last major accident of our lifetime? Experts say not likely, with around 435 active commercial reactors running worldwide, many of these dating from a previous era, and over 60 new reactors planned or under construction. Is more of a question of when, not whether, another accident will happen. Experts also state that most nuclear reactors are located near densely populated parts of the world where energy demand is at its highest. Indeed, it has been estimated that the next accident may expose to as many as 30 million people to radioactive contamination. So how does safety and nuclear accidents and incidents affect the possibility of a nuclear renaissance? With a negative perception in the eyes of the public, it has become difficult to try and push forward with new sites or new reactor plants at existing sites. With more and more discussion on cheaper and safer alternatives like natural gas, the concern over the safety of masses over a nuclear accident also makes a nuclear renaissance more difficult to occur. The next section we're talking about in this presentation is energy demand. We're going to talk about the growth in the population and the need for more electrical power. We're going to talk about the competition to nuclear power from other venues. We're going to take a look at where the U.S. is headed. And we're also going to look at the global outlook. The United Nations is predicting world population growth from 6.7 billion in 2011 to 8.7 billion by 2035, which is an increase of 30% of the total population. So the demand for energy must increase substantially over that period. Most of the developing nations is what needs the reliable power generation. Currently, nuclear power makes up 11.6% of the world's total electrical power. Nuclear power does have competition from other fuel sources. As we stated, nuclear power makes up 11.6% of the world's electricity. The rest is made up from coal, 41.2%, oil at 4.8%, natural gas, 21.8%, and other sources at 20.6%. Coal is not limited in quantities, but is concentrated in certain areas and has to be brought to the countries that need it. One of the issues with coal is a concern over carbon emissions and our environment. Oil is more limited in quantity and availability, and the price per barrel has been steadily increasing over recent years. Some experts believe that this eventually would the world's supply of oil will dry out. Natural gas is becoming more and more popular, and it's becoming cheaper with increased fracking. So where is the U.S. headed? As our country continues to grow, so does the need for more electrical power. Nuclear energy is a practical enterprise that already has been used for decades. With many companies planning on adding reactors to the existing plants, the feasibility of nuclear power generation being able to increase with the demand is quite possible. According to one expert, he asserts that as many as 40 nuclear power plants will need to be constructed by 2035 to help support a 1% annual increase in U.S. electrical power demand. This does not cover the entire increase, though, but it is in conjunction with other methods of renewable, carbon-free electricity production. Aggressively developing a nuclear energy program can be one of the United States' most viable options for conquering climate change, overcoming economic duress, and paving the way for a sustainable future. Outside of the United States, the rest of the world is moving towards an increased nuclear power generation plan or starting to build nuclear plants from scratch. With smaller electrical grids, nuclear power can make up over half of these smaller countries' power supply. Developing countries are already researching the feasibility of this. In Latin America, they've embraced nuclear power and are ready with plans to build nuclear power infrastructure. Additionally, in the Middle East and Africa, despite the Fukushima natural disaster, nuclear power is considered a promising source of energy. So does energy demand promote a nuclear renaissance? The future demand is prevalent for nuclear power generation to take off as the world's population continues to grow. Due to the fact that there are technological advances and everything requires power from somewhere, the demand for energy would support the idea that a nuclear renaissance is entirely possible. The next section we will be talking about in this presentation is personnel constraints. We will discuss the aging workforce, possibility of outsourcing and staffing companies, and the idea globally of what they're doing to combat personnel shortages. Although overshadowed by recession, a labor shortage continues to loom for the energy industry. Most of the experienced workers have started coming to an age where they are getting ready to retire. More than 50% of the workforce is age 45 and older. This leaves a large gap in knowledge when they start to retire, and the younger, inexperienced operators and technicians become the people of seniority. One way that companies are combating this personnel shortage is to outsource some of these jobs. Staffing companies have become more viable for filling positions in the nuclear power generation field, as well as support positions for the industry. A staffing company offers engineering, construction, and maintenance services to the U.S. nuclear utility sector. In 2009, one such company announced a 5-year exclusive alliance with the Tennessee Valley Authority to provide specialized services to their fleet of nuclear power plants. This would allow the company to only fill the positions needed at the time, instead of having to have an increase in hiring for an event like an outage, only to lay people off a few months later. This is not only a problem in the United States, as other nations have also started dealing with this reality. In China, university officials estimate the country will require 8,000 additional nuclear skilled workers by 2020 for as many as 30 planned nuclear reactors. So what are they doing to battle this problem? China has started pushing for more trained workers and is now producing over 500 graduates a year with industry licenses or bachelor's degrees. In the study conducted in 2002, the United Kingdom concluded that half of the nation's nuclear workforce would face retirement in the next 10 years. Other countries have tried to pull U.S. workers by enticing them with overly lucrative contracts to come work there for a few years. So does the personnel shortage adversely affect a nuclear renaissance? Finding skilled workers will not be a deciding factor. The possibilities are out there as long as people are informed and the power companies are willing to pay. Informing the public and our youth is one way to get people knowledgeable on this. Many teachers are unaware of the shortage of skilled craft workers and the high salaries offered to such workers. With more training and higher incentives, we can attract those personnel that would be a good fit for the nuclear industry. And the final topic I'll be talking about in my presentation is new technology. We will discuss Generation 4 reactors and another reactor that's currently in research and development. There are 6 recognized reactor types as Generation 4 reactors. These 6 types are the gas-cooled fast reactor, the lead-cooled fast reactor, sodium-cooled fast reactor, the molten salt reactor, supercritical water-cooled reactors, and the very high temperature reactors. Generation 4 reactors offer passive safety features, prevent core melting, and shield gamma radiation even under extreme conditions. Another advantage of the Generation 4 nuclear reactors is their ability to conserve the precious fuel that is in limited supply throughout the world. The Gen 4 technology boasts of high efficiencies of about 40 to 50%, which help reduce the consumption of nuclear fuel compared to the current generation of nuclear reactors. The reduction in the amount of spent fuel produced is a huge advantage, as the requirement for storing it is lessened, along with the cost associated with it. This allows us to have less waste that is needed to be stored. With all the problems with permanently storing radioactive waste around the world, greater efficiency would alleviate the burden of finding such locations. Another advantage of the Gen 4 reactor is the reduced threat of terrorism and nuclear proliferation. Generation 4 nuclear energy systems will increase the assurance that they are very unattractive and the least desirable route for diversion or theft of weapon-usable material, and provide increased physical protection against acts of terrorism. The high efficiency of these reactors is one of the ways they are not a feasible means for proliferation. The closed fuel cycles make reactors more efficient, but also proliferation resistant. There is another type of new reactor that is starting to go through research and development. It is TerraPower's Generation 4 Traveling Wave Reactor. The TWR commercial reactor plant design is a 1,150 megawatt liquid sodium cooled fast reactor that uses depleted uranium as fuel. This would allow depleted uranium that comes as a byproduct from regular reactors to be reused, thereby reducing the amount of waste that has to be stored. So does new technology promote the possibility of a nuclear renaissance? With all different types and varying compositions of these new small-medium reactors, the possibility of a nuclear renaissance is entirely possible. The ability for these new, smaller, more efficient reactors that provide more stable power and less waste, especially for developing nations that do not need as much power generation as older reactors produce, a nuclear renaissance would definitely be more likely with them. So what does this all mean? Nuclear renaissance, fact or fiction? For my part, 3 of my sections would promote a nuclear renaissance and 2 would not. Fortunately, the 2 that do not highly outweigh the 3 that it would. Additionally, with my counterparts, portions of this larger topic, we have decided and discussed that a nuclear renaissance is not very likely in the future. Even though there are some aspects that would say yes, we could happen, the ideas of nuclear waste, with the huge problem of permanently storing this stuff, outweighs most of the other aspects of this possibility. Again, my name is Justin Pulliam. Thank you for viewing my presentation on nuclear renaissance, fact or fiction, for Nuclear 495.